Hey, welcome to your Virgo horoscopes for the week of December 3rd through the 9th. It's our first official full week of December. It's also officially the week we go into the shadow period of the final Mercury retrograde of the year. It snuck up on us. On Wednesday the 6th, we move into the shadow period of the retrograde, which starts 7 days later on Wednesday the 13th. Honestly, and it is in Capricorn, so it is another earth sign, dominantly earth sign, Mercury retrograde. Now they are moving into fire signs next year, so it won't be quite so earth dominated, which is good. It has been for a while now, so it'd be nice to move away from that. But there's a couple of things here I think that are really significant because, well, a couple of things. One, in terms of Mercury retrogrades, the earth signs really are the ones that are the problem solvers. They're the ones that get things done, they make things happen. Having all these Mercury retrogrades and earth signs has really gotten in the way of that in many ways. However, at the same time, I feel that timing is everything. And while, yes, we like to just solve problems right away and get it done and over with, sometimes we're not learning from them if we try and get through them too quickly at the same time. And I feel like this is going to be a really valuable lesson for you Virgos who tend to like to just move through things as quickly as you possibly can because you want to get to the next thing. I totally get it. Being an Aquarian, I understand that completely. I sympathize. I embrace you, my brothers. And I get really frustrated when I can't just solve the problem and move through it really quickly because I'm not paying attention to the lesson. And the lesson is everything. As annoying as that is, it is. We're kicking off the week with the moon in Virgo. It will be moving into your sign late on Sunday, moving in fully on, I'm sorry, late on Sunday, moving in fully on Monday, kicking off Monday in a T square with the Sun, Mars, and Saturn. Now, first of all, the moon and Virgo are focused on relationships. So to have the moon influencing relationships, obviously that's not something that we want to look that we're looking forward to. That's usually emotional issues within said relationships. It's not necessarily something that we want to deal with. I get that. Unfortunately, it's relationships. We're always going to deal with that. People change. It's really annoying, but people change over time or they don't change. And we do. And they kind of stay the same, but we outgrow them in some way. And when you're dealing with relationships that are hindering your goals, that becomes a really big problem, especially for Virgos, because the Sun and Mars, all of that energy is going towards your long-term goals, while Saturn's focus is on self. So we're basically looking at you putting all of this energy into your goals, but somebody else keeps coming in and trying to take some of that energy, trying to share some of that energy, does not want to be left out of whatever it is that you're doing. And that just can get so incredibly frustrating after a while. I've been in this situation numerous times, and there are instances where it is necessary to cut certain relationships because they just don't align with what you're doing right now. But we don't necessarily just have to cut them out either. There is also that element of communicating with them, and that's where the Mercury retrograde comes in. Virgos do have a tendency to be very powerful communicators, but can be very nasty communicators at the same time. So if you're communicating passive aggressively, if you're not just getting to the point, if you're pushing the point in somebody's face like you're beating them with it, all of these things are not going to be helpful to you. The best way that I can think of right now off the spot to deal with this situation is to sit these people down and explain to them, I know I really haven't had a lot of time to dedicate to our relationship. But once I get past this next stage of what I'm doing, I swear I'll open up sometime, or I'll have a little bit more time to be able to open up for you. Most of the time people are okay with that. If they're not okay with that, that's when you might want to reconsider actually keeping them around, if that makes sense, depending on the situation, of course. We do have the moon moving into a grand trine with Jupiter and Mercury, which is nice. Now, a grand trine, that's a lot of energy helping you towards those goals, specifically your career goals, because that's what Mercury is really focused on right now, while Jupiter is focused on the past. So it's reminding you about which kind of relationships you should be building right now. Virgos are relationship people. They're people. They love people. But there's a whole lot to be said about, and I've heard this a million times, it's true. You are who you hang out with. And so if you're continuing to spend your time with people who are unmotivated and not very goal oriented and can't seem to get out of their own mess and can't figure out how to do it, or just sit around complaining about it a lot, you're going to tend to do the same thing. You can fight against it for a really long time, but ultimately it just wears you down. It's like these people are pulling you down a hole. So it's also important to expand on those relationships as well, especially when you're talking about long-term career goals. You want to be hanging out with the successful crowd and not necessarily the fun one that's over here, because the fun crowd over here might be a lot of fun, but they're not going anywhere. They're just still continuing to stay there and have fun. Whereas the successful people, you are mimicking that behavior. You're mimicking forward movement behavior. You're also learning from these individuals as well, because most of the time they're open to share their experiences in terms of how they got where they are. So you tend to be more successful when you hang out with people who are already successful than you are when you hang out with people who aren't, if that makes sense. And it's really important. It is a really important thing. As we move into Tuesday, the moon continues, or actually moves into an opposition with Neptune. Neptune is retrograde at this time. The retrograde ends at the end of the week. Not that we care, because the moon's going to be out of there. But the moon moves into opposition with Neptune. Neptune is all about intuition. And again, if we're focused on relationships, sometimes those relationships can, we're getting intuitive thoughts about those relationships, but we're blocking them because we don't want to see it. And that is not a good idea. Nothing good ever comes out of it. The thing is about relationships and about people and about being a people person in general, people let you down. It's just in our DNA to do that. There's really nothing that we can do to get around that problem, from happening. It just kind of is what it is. So we can't necessarily just rely on people and expect them to be the same that they always have. And we definitely can't be blocking our intuition, which is trying to give us validation that this is not a working relationship. So it can be kind of frustrating. The moon also moves into a trine with Uranus. Uranus is focused right on the cusp of the past and your mind and how the mind works. And I feel like this is helpful for a couple of different reasons. One, we tend to look at our relationships with other people from an emotional standpoint. So if we're happy and we're having a good time with this person is the best thing since sliced bread. If the person is making us unhappy, we're looking at the relationship as just being unhappy all the time. We don't take in the whole relationship. We're only looking at it depending on the situation that's currently going on. And this is where Uranus comes in. Uranus is saying, this is a thought process that you have followed most of your life, and it's not helping you get out of your head. Stop writing the story, if that makes sense. We are all guilty of writing the story and putting our own spin on something that may or may not actually be happening. You never know. The moon finally moves out of your sign by Wednesday, which is good because this is when we're entering into the shadow period. So we don't need the double whammy of the two things together, although it is going to be there pretty early on Wednesday, I think. So we're dealing with it a little bit. I think this is a shared problem this day between you and Libra, as the moon kicks off the day in Virgo, but by noon Pacific time moves on to Libra, continuing that opposition with Neptune the entire time. So I feel like what's really interesting here about this, especially because we have Juno, which is also influencing Virgo and our relationships currently right now. We have the dark moon, which is influencing Virgo and our relationships right now. A lot of times we get into a space where we just kind of wish that it would change, because that would just make it so much more convenient for us. Okay. Nobody ever accused Virgos of being a little bit narcissistic. Okay. In fact, you guys are known for that narcissism. Not to say that you guys are all narcissists. There's a difference between a narcissist and a little bit of narcissism. Okay. There's a huge difference here. I'm not talking about narcissists in terms of psychotic people who use their narcissism to control other people. I am talking about being a little bit more self-focused and self-involved here. And it's really difficult when you're when you're dealing with relationships. And I think the number one issue that most relationships have is that they're so busy. Each individual is so busy holding on to what they're not getting and not seeing what they're not providing within the relationship themselves. So it's a good time this week, I feel, to really take stock of that, to really look at, take yourself out of it. Take yourself out of the offended person for just a moment, right? There's always that fine line between being manipulated by somebody and really looking at what is your responsibility in the relationship, right? And you want to look at it for what it is, not necessarily what your brain is making up in the moment, because your brain is always going to say, to validate your feelings. Your brain is always going to be on your side. It's always going to justify your actions to suit you and make everybody else the bad guy. You don't want to look at this situation in this way, because it's not going to be helpful to you. It's not going to be helpful to the relationship. You want to look at this situation for what it is. What are you doing that's damaging the relationship? What are they doing that's damaging the relationship? What are you doing to not fix the problem with what they're doing, and vice versa? Look at it honestly for what it is before you make any decisions on what to do about it, if that makes sense. So that's what I have for you guys this week. It's quite a mouthful, actually. If you love your horoscopes, do consider sending a tip or donation through my Ko-fi link, which is there in the description. Really appreciate the support. You guys are just awesome. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'm Melissa Bruce, Heavy Metal Psychic. I will see you next week. And in the meantime, you guys, you're doing it. You're gonna keep doing it. Keep it going. You guys are awesome. You're doing a great job. I'll see you next week.